Today we are talking about the Contax RTS. Thank you for your time and interest in this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. More information about all kinds of photography can be found on my website, apertureonepointfour.com. The Contax RTS is an SLR camera for 35mm film, manufactured by Yashica, and launched in 1975, after being introduced to the world public at Photokina, in Cologne in 1974. In 1973, the Contax name was licensed to the Japanese manufacturer Yashica, to create a prestigious brand for 35mm cameras, with interchangeable lenses, in cooperation with the German company Carl Zeiss of Oberkochen. At the time, Yashica was a manufacturing giant, with considerable experience in electronically controlled cameras. The Alexander Porsche Group was commissioned to develop the design and ergonomics. The result was the Contax RTS, which became a sales success. The camera can be operated with battery only. There are no mechanical backup times available. The battery used is a 6-volt silver oxide battery, 544 or PX28, or 6-volt alkaline manganese, 4LR44. The battery is located in the base plate, as you can see here, and can be easily removed. A control key is provided to check the battery capacity. To check the battery power, press the battery test key. If the LED battery check indicator lights up, the power is sufficient. If it does not light up, replace the battery. If the battery power is too low, the LED battery check indicator may light up briefly when you press the battery check button. In such a case, also replace the battery. Before inserting a film into the camera, look at the camera from the inside, with the rear panel open. The film is inserted on the far left. There is no sensing of the film speed by means of DX code, since this technology was introduced only a few years later. On the far right is the spool for winding the film after exposure. From this spool, the film is rewound back into the film cartridge, after the exposure is complete, when all the frames have been exposed. The heart of the camera, the electronic focal plane shutter, is clearly visible. In simple terms, the focal plane shutter opens when the shutter is released, allowing light to reach the film, and exposure to take place for the duration of the set exposure time. Loading a 35mm film is quite simple. The back cover is opened by pulling the film rewind crank upwards. The back pops up automatically. Here in the video you can see that the camera back was already open, and I had to pull the film rewind crank up again. The film is inserted as you can see. The film rewind crank is pressed down. Then the film tab is pulled out and threaded under the receiving film sink. Then you advance the film to the next frame, and release the camera. Make sure that the film tab does not slip out of the spool. Transport the film again and release the camera. Close the back, and transport the film further. Release the shutter and repeat the process until the frame counter is at frame 1. It is important that the white mark on the film rewind cork rotates with it. This is an indicator of whether the film has been loaded correctly. Now set the film speed. This is printed on the film cartridge. In this case ASA or ISO 100, the DIN value is no longer in use. It is 21 here. To set the film speed, pull the rotating ring slightly upwards, and turn it to align the mark with the appropriate value. Now it's time to start and the first picture can be taken. The aperture priority is available as the automatic exposure mode. You select the aperture, and the camera automatically sets the correct exposure time. Time and aperture are displayed in the viewfinder. The dial for the exposure times and the automatic exposure is located on the top left of the housing, an unusual position, but one that can be conveniently reached with the right thumb. For manual exposure settings with tracking metering, you select the time and aperture manually, but the camera displays the determined value for a correct exposure. Shutter speeds from 1/2000th to a full 4 seconds are available. Of course, the camera has a bulb setting for longer exposure times. Here the shutter remains open, as long as the shutter release button is pressed. For this, please use a cable release to avoid camera shake, caused by manipulating the camera. A standard cable release cannot be used. You need a special remote release, Contax cable switch S. Even then, companies knew how to create additional revenue. The camera's electromagnetic shutter release is not used for metering. When you press the shutter button, the camera takes a picture directly. To control the exposure time and aperture, press the button on the front of the camera. On the right is seen from the photographer. To attach a lens, align the red dot on the camera bayonet with the red dot on the lens bayonet. Place the lens on the camera bayonet, and rotate the lens clockwise until it clicks into place. To remove the lens, press the small button near the light meter knob, and turn the lens counterclockwise and then remove it from the camera. Here I show you again how to attach the lens from a different perspective. And again removing the lens. The camera also offers other useful functions that are easy to access and operate. One of them is the exposure compensation. It can overexpose or underexpose by 1 or 2 exposure levels. 2 or 4 stand for 1 or 2 stops of more plenty exposure. More light gets onto the film. The numbers half and 1/4, on the other hand, stand for a lower exposure of 1 or 2 exposure levels. Less light gets onto the film. Furthermore, the camera has a stop-down button. When this button is pressed, the aperture closes to the set value. This naturally makes the viewfinder image darker. This is to allow the depth of field to be checked visually. I personally find this rather difficult, with 35mm cameras and useless for me. In my opinion, the 35mm format is not suitable for this. A very useful function, on the other hand, is the mirror lockup. Normally, the mirror bounce can cause some vibrations, which can lead to slight camera movements, and thus blur the image. However, with mirror lockup, the mirror is raised before the exposure, so that no blurring can occur due to the mirror bounce. To lock the mirror, turn the mirror lock lever to the right, until the white line is level with the camera base. Then press in the depth of field preview button. The button locks when pressed in, and the aperture closes to the preselected aperture. This also prevents shock from the aperture closing. Before locking the mirror in the raised position, compose the image, focus, and set the exposure. After the exposure, fold the mirror back to its original position. Once the mirror is folded back to its original position, the depth of field preview button returns to its original position. The mirror lock lever can be operated before or after winding the film. Attention! The automatic exposure control does not work if the mirror is locked in the raised position. Also, the camera offers a self-timer. It can be used so that the photographer can also be included in the photo for group shots. The lead time is 7 to 10 seconds. You can also use the self-timer for pictures taken from a tripod, if you want to maintain the image detail, and not change it by moving the camera slightly in your hands. With short exposure times, such as 1/500th of a second or faster, you can usually do without the mirror lockup in this case. Now I have already so often transported the film one frame further. Now I finally show you the frame number display. You can either use flash units via the X contact on the accessory shoe, or you can use an X-Sync socket for a wired flash unit. The exposure time must be set to 1/60th of a second on the camera, if you are using electronic flash units. For flash bulbs, please use 1/30th of a second for even illumination. The aperture you need to use depends on your flash unit, among other things. In any case, aperture and shutter speed must be set manually. The camera does not offer automatic flash control. Besides the already mentioned battery compartment, the base plate offers the contacts for a motorized film transport, the obligatory tripod connection, and the film rewind button. After the film is exposed, it must be rewound back into its film cartridge. To do this, the small button on the base plate must be pressed, as just seen. Then the film can be rewound using the film rewind crank. When you no longer feel any resistance, and turn a little further, the film has completely disappeared into the film cartridge. I do not rewind films that I want to develop myself completely into the film cartridge. That way, I don't have to take the film leader out again to insert it into the film development spool. The Contax RTS is an extremely solidly built camera that offers all the features most photographers want. Besides the robust construction, the excellent Carl Zeiss lenses, or the possibility to use the cheaper Yashica lenses, it offers a mirror lockup and a fastest shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second. Even today, this camera still gets a clear buy recommendation from me.